That's right, everybody. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey inside the Black Vault with me. I'm your host, John Greenwald Jr., founder and creator of the Black Vault. And today we're essentially taking a deep dive into some new documents that I got that have created, well, quite the controversy on a few social media networks. There's a lot of conversation about it. Some people could not care less about this whole DOPSR thing, while others think it's really important, like I do. It's why I've kind of beat this drum since day one. And that's why I'm doing this video, because I think it's incredibly important. And these new documents shed light on that very story. Others, by the questions that I got submitted here, well, you may be scratching your head going, what in the world is DOPSR? Like, what does that mean? Well, we're going to dive into all of it. If you are watching the behind the scenes, and this is truly live, you can ask your questions. I will try and grab as many as I can. I've already put some in this presentation from X, formerly Twitter. If you don't follow me there, that is where I am most active. So if you do use social media, that is where you can probably find me the most. If you don't use social media, you're a lot smarter than me, because it can get brutal out there. So good for you for staying away from it. But if you're like me and use it, definitely check that out. But let's just go ahead and dive in to today's topic, which again is all about the UFO whistleblower by the name of David Grusch. I'm not a fan of that nickname, but that's what the media says. I get a lot of flack for putting it in quotes when I refer to it. But hey, that's what he's referred to. That's his nickname, the UFO whistleblower. David Grusch, we're diving in to the DOPSR review that we've heard a lot about. And again, we'll go over kind of the basics of what that means. But these new documents are something that we are going to explore in this presentation. So where I want to start is something that I think is probably the most important part of this, and it is explaining why this is important, because I get a lot of feedback, and it really does kind of go across the board on the type of feedback that I get. And in this specific topic, some of that feedback is, well, why do we care, John? Like, who cares that David Grusch has not shown all of what he submitted to the Department of Defense, which is cleared for public view, that we can see all of it? And I will start here. You don't need to take my word on the importance of it. Where I believe that the proof is that it is important is the fact that since day one, we have heard about the DOPSR submission that David Grusch put into the Department of Defense, and how they reviewed and essentially cleared everything that he has said. That includes the original debrief article. That includes what he said in his News Nation article. And that includes this newest with Jesse Michaels. Sorry for kind of the wonky screenshot there, but that is the video screenshot. I don't know why they chose that. I don't think it's the most flattering of all photographs to choose for somebody. And it's unfortunate, because for me, there's some comedic part of that I don't think we need in a story like this. But, you know, that's just my 2 cents. That being said, we hear about this DOPSR thing in all of these interviews, stressing it is important. In addition to the interviews, we've also heard about it from Congressman Luna during the UAP quote-unquote whistleblower hearing when David Grusch testified before Congress. She, although with respect to the Congresswoman, mischaracterized what it means, and credit to David Grusch for kind of politely putting it in the right framing. She brought it up as well as kind of a testament to his credibility. So again, you don't need to take my word for it. Just look at everybody that's talking about it. And that's why it is important. But the problem is, though, is even though the Department of Defense took what David Grusch submitted to them, and for those who don't know what a DOPSR review is, here's kind of the nutshell. When somebody like the UFO whistleblower David Grusch comes out and he wants to tell the public something, publish a book, do a PowerPoint presentation, whatever it may be, the fact that he was a former DoD employee and he was highly cleared, he has to take that material and submit it to DOPSR for a review. And what that essentially does is takes, and this is the, again, an arm of the Department of Defense, but DOPSR then looks at that material, sees what David Grusch wants to do with it, and either stamps the approval, denies it outright, or they approve it with amendments. And those amendments are given, and that person has to, again, just change whatever the Department of Defense says they have to change because they are looking out for security concerns. Let me stress up front, if you've never seen me talk about DOPSR before, which I have quite a few times in the past few years, it is not a fact check. So anybody that has to go through this process can submit 100% absolute downright fiction to the Department of Defense, but the review still has to take place. The DoD looks at that fiction and they say, okay, well, nothing is being alluded to here that is a threat to national security or harms their security oath or anything like that, or reveals classified information. That's what the security review is all about. And so they get that approval and you're good to go. So we always want to stress it is not a fact check, but that has often been misconstrued by some people out there that, hey, the DoD approved this, so that adds to the credibility. And quite the contrary, it does not. So now that you've got a little bit of a basis on what exactly a DOPSR review is, in this case, now back to David Grusch specifically, we were told from day one that he did that step. Good for him. That's awesome. He needed to. But on top of that, he got his approval. Great. So now we can all feel comfortable that he's not spilling classified information. But he never showed the documentation that he submitted to the Department of Defense. Now, originally, and I brought this up again very, very early on, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's cleared. So we should be able to see exactly what the Department of Defense saw and cleared for David Grusch to talk about. But we never did. As time went on, one of the only reasons that I thought, hey, this is a viable reason for him not to do this is, let's say he submitted that review. He got 100% approval to talk about 100% of what he submitted, so that's great. But he decided to hold back for whatever reason, let's say 30% of it. And he was holding on to it to maybe testify before Congress at a future date. Now, this was before he testified, so I thought that's reasonable. That is something that is understandable, that maybe he doesn't want to put that out in the public realm on News Nation, no offense to them, or the debrief, no offense to them, but rather this should be revealed to the general public under oath in front of a congressional hearing. That was the only thing I came up with. And now fast forward, we've done that. We should have heard everything by now that is in this DOPSR review, but has not. We have not. And that has been an ongoing concern of mine. Why not? Because if it's cleared and 100% cleared, we should be able to see it outright. There's absolutely no reason to. Well, as we're kind of discussing this in the public realm, a lot of this debate being on various social media networks and radio shows I've talked to about this, I had filed a FOIA request from day one on trying to get access to that DOPSR paperwork. But it really shouldn't have to come out through FOIA, and this is just my opinion and 2 cents here. It shouldn't have to come out through FOIA because it's cleared. That's the entire point of the process, that you were taking a product that you created, again, that PowerPoint presentation, that book, in this case, what we were told they were interview questions, that is approved as essentially a product. So you're saying these 10 pages, 50 pages, 100 pages, whatever it may be, gives it back to that person doing the request, you're clear to publish them in full. And that's what the whole point of this is. Many other very high-ranking government officials have gone through this process as well. John Bolton being one that even got in trouble kind of through the review process and expands beyond DOPSR. But just using that as an example, that a lot of, again, former government officials have done this process, some with no problem, while others end up in court and litigation over this. But back to David Grusch, we haven't seen it. I filed the FOIA, and there I sat and waited. But as News Nation was doing more and more of these stories, we started seeing a glimpse of the DOPSR paperwork, and this added even more questions in my mind, because it was like, well, wait a minute. Okay, so maybe you had a legitimate reason to hang on to this thing. Now, all of a sudden, News Nation is flashing them, but very quickly in graphic montages and stuff like that. This was one of those, what we were told, DOPSR review papers. And credit to Mick West, who actually contacted News Nation and said, hey, you guys had a graphic on screen. It was very quick, kind of low resolution. Can you send me those graphics? And although News Nation wouldn't send him this, let me make sure that pen's coming up, this back page because it wasn't shown, they felt that it was okay to send him this page, which was shown in full. You see that over here. I'm not going to read it in full to you, but I will link it in the show notes below that will take you to that one page. And that was what we were able to see. But we saw that there was more. So again, that question mark in my mind is, well, wait a minute. You're handing these out to news agencies, nothing classified in it. There's nothing secret, nothing sensitive. Why aren't you just releasing them to the public? Because again, there were so many people stressing the importance of this DOPSR review, but they wouldn't show you the DOPSR review. And that's what didn't make sense to me at all. The only other thing that we saw was, yet again, a graphic on News Nation. This was one of the approval letters that David Grusch got. And this was essentially from the DoD saying, okay, we took your DOPSR submission, we reviewed it, and you are approved across the board. Now, one thing that I want to dispel, because this is a myth that has really gained traction if you watch discourse about this online, is this sentence here. However, this approval does not include any photograph, picture, exhibits, captions, or other supplemental material not specifically approved by this office. Now, a lot of kind of rumors sparked from that essentially Grusch had submitted photographs, pictures, exhibits, or whatever, and that those were denied. So the DoD was going out of their way to say, hey, you know, we'll approve your questions, but none of this other material is approved. And that in internet legend and lore went ahead and spawned these stories that there was probably more to it. I want to dispel that right now and say, no, that is actually their common language. Here's one from 2014 saying the exact same thing. This is a different DOPSR review. You've probably never heard of this person nor the company, but this was a DOPSR case. This document is one that I dug up to kind of prove that point. So let's dispel that myth. There was nothing else. Here is another one. Just wanted to show you guys an example. This was actually from earlier this year, not too long ago, from Kash Patel. You might recognize that name. That is someone that has quite a following on social media and so on. Regardless, they had submitted some stuff, and this is how it looks when there's an amendment submitted. So it's like they look at it and they realize that part of that security review, there's some concerns. So in order for the reviewer to pass and get approval, full approval, the DoD goes back to them with amendments. So I just wanted to show you guys exactly what that looked like as well, because those DOPSR forms, they're not real prevalent around. You kind of have to dig them up or get them through FOIA. So now let's dig a little bit deeper. So we know that David Grusch and his claims that came out in all the various interviews, I would say the interviews are much more strongly worded and pointed versus his testimony to Congress. But regardless, everything that we have been told that is cleared includes the two major points in my mind that I want to see how they're written to the DoD. That would include the non-human intelligence craft that has been recovered by the U.S. government and military, and the fact that they are reverse engineering that non-human intelligence craft, and also what he described as dead pilots. Later in the hearing, he said biologics, but essentially bodies. So those to me are kind of like the top most important part of what his claims are. And I think a natural concern here is the fact that if you did have facts like that, even though you're not saying where the bodies are or what company is reverse engineering or what agency or whatever it might be, that those facts are going to be inherently classified anyway. I have a whole video that is on the security classification guide that explores that, and I won't go through it all again because it does get admittedly very tedious. But regardless, certain facts about things, even though you lack specificity, are classified in nature. That is well proven and documented in history. So the natural question mark is, well, if he's saying these things, they would be classified. There's kind of like no way around it in my book, because look at the secrecy on UAP, and investigating unidentified craft, and the secrecy is immense. You don't think that there's going to be some type of the same level, if not more secrecy, when you're talking about non-human intelligence, their craft, reverse engineering, and dead alien pilots or NHI pilots? There's no way in my mind that that would pass the mustard at all. Full stop. And it's been a concern of mine since day one. It's like, how does that happen? Now, the argument is that there was enough vagueness that DOPSR just let it go. And in Grusch's most recent interview, he called it a catch-22. I'll deal with that later in the presentation. But essentially, it was vague enough for them to just go, oh, yeah, well, he's not revealing Project XYZ or the bodies are buried here, those types of facts. So, yeah, we'll just go ahead and approve it. That didn't really make sense to me, but I wanted to make sure that you had kind of that counter argument on why he got this passed. But yet again, the question mark is, look, if he got it passed, why not just show it? And why it's important is, again, because the DoD doesn't fact check, but the general public who's hearing this through News Nation and the Debrief and various other outlets that are covering it, and then obviously the congressional testimony, if we keep hearing about DOPSR, we should see that paperwork. And although when I was creating this presentation, I realized that everybody really closely involved in this story has somewhat spoken on the DOPSR process, I didn't want to add 2 hours breaking down what their statements were on why this DOPSR was important, the DOPSR review was important, or why they were hiding it. I invite you all to kind of look that up. But there is one quote that I'll pull because I think it pulls into this story a little bit. And this was by Leslie Kean. She did this interview with Whitley Strieber, where Ralph Blumenthal was also on the show. And this is what her exact quote was. He, meaning David Grusch, wasn't specific about it. So it's okay for people to say in broad strokes things that are just broad statements where any specifics about it, about those items that they might be discussing, are classified. But there was nothing in the statement that said where the crashes were or who was responsible for the program or anything like that. They look at it that he is stating his opinions, his beliefs. He was, that was the quote, he was very strong statements that he made. We were actually surprised that it got approved. So with this quote, you have a couple things. In my opinion, personally, it's mischaracterizing how secrecy works on that level. David Grusch is an incredibly intelligent guy. So I think he knows that certain things are going to be inherently classified, even with vagueness and lack of specificity. I wish I could ask him, and I would if I was able to get a hold of him, but sadly, he and his attorney have not returned any messages. But I think that it would be great to clarify that are you really arguing that you just were not that specific? And so ergo, these closely guarded, highly classified, and in his words, illegal activity, it's okay to talk about when you aren't specific. And in my 2 cents, that would be not correct. But I would love to hear his response to that, to dig in a little bit more. But here we have it here from the journalist who broke the story, one of the two for the debrief. But then she goes on to say it's just simply his opinion and it's his own belief. I'll put a pin in that because I think that that's actually going to play a role later here when I deal with that catch-22. But on top of that, when I deal more so with the documents that came out and the redactions themselves. Obviously, the man himself, that's going to be the most important when it comes to the DOPSR process. Now, I know it's frustrating that I read transcripts, but copyright strikes and stuff like that are pretty rampant nowadays. So I'm playing it a little bit safe. So I invite you to look up Jesse Michael's interview with David Grusch. I'll link that in the show notes below here on YouTube. If you're watching anywhere else, just go to theblackvault.com/live. That will bounce you to the YouTube channel where you can get the show notes and everything like that. But here's what David Grusch says. even if it's about this stuff, like, I know it sounds insane, but like, you literally have to say, like, this is why I want to talk about. And then Jesse Michael says, why do you think they approved it? And David Grusch then brings in the catch-22 idea. These are David Grusch's words. Catch-22, because so they'd have to self-identify and highlight their concerns to redact. So the office who would propose a redaction, say it's a 3-letter agency or whatever, right? They'd have to be like this office objected to you saying crash retrievals. Here we're citing the security classification guide. No, and then you can litigate that, right, to get it unredacted. If you think that's an inappropriate application of security, if you got redacted like that and it cited what organization and what security reason it is, I would just publish that. And then the public can make its own interpretation why, the U.S. government's withholding information about that kind of thing and wanted to sequester my speech. So it's a catch-22, honestly, for them. And damned if they do, damned if they don't. Now, again, forgive my transcript reading, but I invite you to look up the actual clip. But that is the transcript on the YouTube video. Now, let's start dissecting that, because in the hearing, when Congresswoman Luna brought this up, she was, and again, with respect, mischaracterizing it. And to David Grusch's credit, kind of corrected her, saying it's essentially he has to do it. So it's not like he was really trying to show his credibility here, mainly because they don't fact check, but they just have to look at it from a security perspective. And in the video I did post that hearing, I will compliment him again. That was a great and very professional way, I feel, that he corrected the congresswoman and framed the DOPSR review process appropriately. Now, fast forward to the Jesse Michaels interview. Now you've got all sorts of stuff that I feel, and here's my personal opinion, is not true. And here's the proof of it. Now, the catch-22, he's saying, oh, they're going to have to reveal why he can't publish certain things. So he'll reveal and publish to the general public that response from them. Well, his security oath and everything will still prohibit him from just kind of publishing whatever. But my guess is DOPSR is not going to go into that much detail. They're also not going to say you can't talk about crash retrievals and pinpoint that topic, but rather they will, in his words, redact his DOPSR submission. If that part is all true, and they didn't issue any amendments or anything like that, they just full on redacted it, and I'll take him at his word that he feels that's how it would have played out. They're not going to just redact 2 words, but rather they will remove the entire thing. In addition, even if David Grusch was told the reason, or his attorney, or both, I truly don't believe he could just turn around and blast that to the world. There are numerous cases that support the secrecy behind these types of processes, and even litigation in the courts that I mentioned John Bolton as one off the top of my head example in the last few years, but there have been others where high-ranking government officials, they want to publish a book, but they're denied publishing, let's say, certain aspects of that book, even certain chapters or whatever. So they litigate that, and they do so in the courts. That does not make everything public. There are still layers of security that protect all of this. So the fact that David Grusch would say, oh, I just publish it and let the world see it, and how they're sequestering my speech, that's not true. On top of that, he references the security classification guide that needs to be referenced. Here are multiple examples on the fact that security classification guides, albeit they exist, do not have to be made public. So if they do not feel that David Grusch has a right to know, they can redact it, very much like these documents did here. The derived from line is that security classification guide, or whatever mandates that security. So let's just assume for a moment they would say, listen, Mr. Grusch, you're denied because of this security classification guide, but your clearance level at this point allows you to hear that. He can't turn around and publish that to the general public. So why I'm laughing with this is that answer under oath to the Congresswoman politely correcting has morphed into something that is, in my opinion, just not true. And this is backed up, again, by case law, DOPSR review submissions, and FOIA cases on top of all of that. What you're looking at is obviously the FOIA part of this, where you don't need to reveal security classification guides. Again, I don't think that they would redact the 2 words and let the context play around those 2 words. So redact 2 and just let everything else play. No, I think you'd probably get something like this. This is a mock-up. So no, this is not an official document, but trying to illustrate a point that if they say, hey, you can't talk about crash retrievals, but we're not going to let you allude that you're taking trucks out there to potentially retrieve something and let the general public decide. No, they remove everything. That's how redactions work. So that is not what you have to take my word from, but you can look at the tens of thousands of cases of redacted information that has been declassified either through FOIA or through proactive releases to the general public. That backs that up. They don't just do a word or 2, they will do paragraphs or pages. So this just doesn't make sense that he would just grab the bullhorn and go, hey, general public, they're sequestering my speech, so fill in the blanks. No, security doesn't work that way. You don't need to be an attorney. You don't need to have a top secret clearance. All you got to do is look at the reams of examples and evidence that supports that, that supports all of that. Bear with me here. So let's get to the FOIA documents themselves. And this I want to, so now that you've got the background of DOPSR, what the issue is, why it's important, well, that FOIA request that I told you about in the beginning of the video, finally, we got to the point of the documents being released, and I'm going to break them down for you. When I wrote my article this week, if you haven't seen it, that also will be in the show notes below. There is a batch of documents that was released in the case that I filed, not only for the DOPSR submission, but any communications with David Grusch, any internal memos and communications, and any interagency communications. So let's say Dave, and this is a guess, and you'll see why it's a guess in a second, but let's just say in his DOPSR review, he said the NGA did XYZ or the CIA did XYZ. DOPSR would then reach out to those respective agencies, so you'd have that interagency communication. I was going for everything. That's what I always do. I start big, and if they give me a problem, I'll go ahead and wind it down. Well, to my surprise, I got a packet of information. Not everything that I wanted, but enough to kind of get some type of idea. So the way that they came is the way that I published them in that article. But for this presentation, I put them in chronological order and made them make a little bit more sense. I don't know if that's intentional with the government, but sometimes they just slap everything into a PDF and go, here you go. It's not in chronological order. You have repeats. Everything's out of order. Sometimes you got to work a little bit. So that's what I did in this presentation to kind of make it more make sense. So why I'm bringing that up, if you did load the documents to go along, they will not be in the order of that PDF. So March 7th, 2023, we see that this is the first time that David Grusch reached out to DOPSR and sent them 2 files. This is obviously the first DOPSR review request. He attached the DD Form 1910. You've seen me talk about this 5+ years ago now, somewhere around that time frame, was when I got the documents on how Luis Elizondo was trying to get a review of the FLIR, the Gimbal, and the Go Fast videos to create an internal database at the DoD. He needed them reviewed so he could release them to other DoD departments and so on and so forth. So he had to go through this process as well, and that process is, again, this DD Form 1910. That's what you're looking at here. You can see David Grusch's name. You can see that he summarized it, unidentified anomalous phenomena. He labeled it as a manuscript. That was his categorization. The NGA is likely what, where he essentially came from. So he's talking about the agency that he worked with. He actually published his CV at the UAP hearing as kind of his bio. So you can see a breakdown of where he was. NGA was one of those places. He was a senior, a senior Geo and Capabilities Requirements Officer. That was his position at NGA. And essentially, just the miscellaneous forms on the DD Form 1910. This was the other attachment. You can see it's really redacted. Now, this is frustrating for obvious reasons because we want to see it. Now, if you remember from slides ago, this was the one that News Nation showed. So I invite you to go read that, but it essentially is kind of a bio. You can see here about the author. They meaning David Grusch, so whomever, if he was working with anybody, created like an author bio that he had submitted. Now, there were some details in there. And again, please feel free to read it to see exactly what this single page says. We haven't seen this page yet. But it was nothing I would say extraordinary. It was more so like, again, about the author page. So is he writing a book? Was he getting this cleared to maybe pitch a book? He labeled it a manuscript. I'm not really sure. Maybe that was just the category because he was going to publish this as a News Nation bio or debrief bio or something that they could use. Again, a lot of question marks there. It would really help if these were just kind of released by David Grusch himself in full, but then with a, what authorship bio were you creating this for? And if it was for his debrief interview, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But a little bit of context would definitely help with this. So even though we can't see those redactions, and in fact, let me go back here and explain what the redactions are. You probably can't see it on the screen, but anytime the government actually redacts something, they give you a number. And generally it's B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, all the way to B9. Those are the 9 exemptions of the Freedom of Information Act. Now, B6 is what's called essentially the privacy exemption. So you see a lot of names, you see addresses, phone numbers, credit cards, social security numbers, depending upon the context of the documents. That's what essentially you see as B6 information, medical information, stuff like that, all rightfully exempted under FOIA. I respect people's privacy. That kind of stuff I never want to go after. Medical stuff, personal identifying information, that's not what I'm interested in, nor have I ever. Nor is it what this is. So I think that this really kind of extended the arm of what B6 actually was, and they just redacted everything that David Grusch wrote. It's technically not a government document, so ergo it's not technically FOIA-able until he submits it to the U.S. government. Then that product, per se, is FOIA-able, but sometimes the same protocol to release information doesn't apply. So, for example, if you're looking at a biography of a public official, you could get all that. It's FOIA-able, and on top of that, they wouldn't B6 it. Why? Because it's a government document created as a bio for a government official. This, however, is a personal product from the mind of David Grusch, ergo his property. So I think what the legal argument was, or is, even though I'm appealing it, to try and give that opposing view, I think they saw this as a product of his, and it's up to him to release it to the general public. So it is private and personal to him, even though DOPSR approved it. So many asked, well, this is a fully cleared document. Why can't they release it? Well, they, meaning the DoD, can't, because FOIA exemptions apply when they give this non-government document out. And B6, in their mind, applies to this in toto, the incomplete, completely. Why? Again, I think that's their logic. So it's all based on personal identifying information or privacy information. That is all B6. Now, why I went through that is it's very important because it plays into the appeal. This in the batch of documents was that approval letter. You remember also from the screenshot of News Nation, this was shown on screen. Here's a reminder what that screen looked like. That was the bio. You'll be able to read that, what I just showed you that was fully redacted. You can read that part, at least the first page. This was then the approval that was sent to him, but the next thing that happened the day after, so this was April 4th, so it took about a month. The day after, David Grusch sent another DOPSR request, and he said, "Good afternoon. Here is a future Q&A for review. This was created on my own personal accord and was not a document that was part of my previous official work as a government civilian. Now, in his first email, let me go back to that. I don't know what, if anything, like a telephone call went along with this, but he didn't say this isn't a government document or made while I was a government employee or made by his own personal accord. That language lacked here. So I don't know if he made the phone call. They said, hey, you need to send it here. So he said, okay. And then he did. And they already had that caveat. I don't know. Again, all great information that we could get straight from the source, but nobody's really talking about that. Why is it important? Well, is this particular page government generated somehow? I mean, that doesn't make sense, but you know, the language is different. So we at least have to note it. But he said, here's another attachment. You can see that attachment here, sent April 5th. Here was that attachment, list of questions, list of answers, and the same redaction on all of the answers. The questions were able to be viewed for the most part. So just kind of dissecting some of the questions here. Again, I want to stress, because this was confusing for some online, these were all written by David Grusch, or somebody sent them to David Grusch. He put them in a document, wrote out his answers, and was seeking approval for that. In my personal opinion, I did reach out to Ralph Blumenthal. I CC'd Leslie Kean, but the email bounced. So the email I have for her is not right. In the past, I've written her on Facebook, have never received a response. Have spoken to Ralph Blumenthal before, but he did not respond to this. In my personal guess, and I could absolutely be wrong, these were questions submitted by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. That's my guess. And these questions start off stemming from them seeing the previous submission. Why do we know that? Well, because News Nation flashed the page unredacted. And the first question here, can you expand, quote, a publicly unknown Cold War for recovered and exploited physical material that has been waged under the noise floor for decades, unquote. That is from that previous document. So whomever wrote these, again, I'm assuming probably Leslie Kean and or Ralph Blumenthal for the debrief article, they saw that first one, read that, created this list of questions. There's 10 of them, it looks like. And David Grusch then created his answers and got review. What recovered physical material are you referring to? What is the nature source of the material? When was it retrieved? How many programs did you uncover? Are they still active today? Were you able to determine the specific individuals involved? You may remember that Harry Reid strongly suggested that they were at Lockheed Martin. He said to the New Yorker, I was told for decades that Lockheed's had some of these retrieved materials, and I tried to get it, as I recall, a classified approval by the Pentagon to have me go look at that stuff. They would not approve that, unquote. Another question, why were you so severely harassed? This must have something to do with the implications and explosive nature of what you uncovered. It was a threat because of what it was a threat because of what it revealed, and that was the question. What was the unfathomable and constitutional dilemma that you referred to, obviously in that previous document? But as you see the number in question 5, question 6 and 7 are probably under this redaction. They just did one big redaction. For whatever reason, did not give us what the questions were. Don't know why, but again, they did the Privacy Act exemption. Here was the third page of that DOPSR review. Why are you doing this? In other words, why is it important to you that this information come out? Do you believe that humanity has a right to the knowledge that we are not alone? It is a paradigm shift. Is this something that the planet should have, rather than this very basic truth be kept secret? So there you have it. Why couldn't we see the answers? Again, it's quite possibly that the DoD is seeing that as a product of David Grusch, and it is up to him to release it to the general public. And that's fine. I hate to say this because I am fighting it. I can understand that. But according to all of these interviews and what we are told, David Grusch has already revealed everything that's underneath these redactions. So yet again, I ask, why can't we see it? What context were his answers? Again, if my assumption is right, and that was just a guess, I'm stressing that because I can't prove it. But if these questions were written by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal for the debrief article, I'm curious if these answers will be able to find the quotes that they pulled from David Grusch in that article. My guess is yes. Again, nothing nefarious, but I'm just trying to piece together exactly what all of this is about. So when we can see the answers, we'll be able to piece that together. But now you obviously have the News Nation interview as well, where it's been reported that David Grusch spent 7 hours on camera with Ross Coulthart, and it was edited down to the hour special that they did. I didn't find any other DOPSR approval. There is a 1-week window from when I filed to that News Nation interview, approximately 1 week, that David Grusch could have maybe issued another DOPSR request, and they somehow fast-tracked it, reviewed what constituted as 7 hours worth of answers. Let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. And a lot of that was production time, repeats, try again, 2 hours, 3 hours. That's a lot of information. Are we led to believe that everything that he talked about, minus his opinions, but when it came to factual information and claims, were all on these 3 pages that were released in the answer brackets that were redacted? You know, something doesn't make sense there if he had 7 hours worth of content with Ross. And again, benefit of the doubt, let's just say a lot of that is fluff. Then 2-3 hours. I mean, 1/3 the time that they're talking about. I don't know. So I reached out to Ross Coulthart as well. In fairness, it was about 36 hours ago from the recording of this. I didn't hear back by the time that I recorded, but I was seeking that confirmation as well. Did the DOPSR, was there a 3rd DOPSR review, a 4th, a 5th? I do have an open FOIA for anything that was created from the original filing of what you're looking at here. Now, when you file a FOIA request, generally the date you file is the cutoff date on when they search for records. So even though they may not process it for 3 months, sadly, that generally is the cutoff date. Every agency is different, and a lot of them just don't have a playbook. They just kind of either do or don't use it as a cutoff date, and you have to confirm. I have not heard from the DoD on what they considered the cutoff date for this. In experience with them, the cutoff date was the date of submission. So again, that week window, maybe there's something else. We'll see, hopefully sooner than later, if a FOIA case will produce, you know, another DOPSR review or something like that. So my whole point here is, with what we are shown, with the evidence that we have before us, the 7 hours he shot with Ross Coulthart, everything that he said with Jesse Michaels, and everything that he submitted to the debrief stems from these 3 pages of questions and answers. And to be honest with you, a lot of this is very kind of, I would say, dangerous, because we know that the DOPSR, we meaning all of us, but especially David Grusch and his attorney, know that all of this is approved to talk about. And generally, when you do a DOPSR review, you are getting a product like a book, like a PowerPoint presentation, I already went through the list, approved, and you publish that. And you generally don't get broad-stroked things to talk about and then expand for hours on end, which is what is going on here. I can't find any example of that. I can find a ton of books, manuscripts, PowerPoint presentations. I could bore you to death for hours on that, of DOPSR review processes, and that have gone through the gamut, and the product that was approved is the product that was published. This is a bit unorthodox. Not to say it's wrong, not to say it hasn't happened. I'm just giving you the facts that anybody can verify, that this just seems odd. That all of that information was contained in this page, and this page, and that's it. So what did DOPSR review? Great question. Glad you asked. All the more reason we should see this from the whistleblower himself. There's no reason not to show it. I don't see any reason. Here's the approval for that document that I went over. You could see verbatim, pretty much the same thing. It's just a different date, April 6th. Yes, it did take a day. There's a couple of reasons for that. That is surprising that it only took a day, but it is quite possible, if we were to see the answers, that this isn't as specific as even the vagueness that we have been talking about, meaning that it is so vague, then they just didn't see any concern whatsoever. They did have one, though, and this was by the reviewer. In the packet of FOIA material, this is why I say details matter, and I love the minutia. This was the correspondence behind the scenes. This in itself tells a little bit of a story as well. Michelle Wiggum was the security review specialist for DOPSR that got David Grusch's submission. She was the one to review it. Now, she writes to a Donald Kluzik, and I'll get to his response in a second. But she says, "Good morning, Don. I have reviewed the interview questions for case 1707. Although he does not divulge specific sensitive information, the author makes reference to sensitive areas. I just wanted you to review." So locales, what is he talking about? An Area 51 type of thing? Yeah, we don't know. It's all redacted, nor does David Grusch show us. So we're all obviously just kind of left to guess here. But as we are led to believe, quick nutshell catch up here, non-human intelligent craft being reverse engineered, and they captured dead alien pilots' bodies. So that all is in this document that Michelle Wiggum just reviewed. And the only concern that she brings up to a supervisor is, hey, he's talking about sensitive areas. You know, can you double check this? Nothing about, hey, he's talking about alien bodies. Like, I would think that this is, you know, of concern. So based on the assumption, and I'll give the benefit of the doubt that we're being told the truth, that all of that NHI stuff is in these answers. Where's any concern whatsoever? Does DOPSR just roll their eyes and go, whatever? I would hate to think so. You should see the type of stuff that they review and from the type of people they review it from. And there's a long list of government officials that are much higher than any UFO whistleblower that has come out, even though David Grusch has an amazing background. So we are talking about top officials in the White House. I believe there was a president as well that went through this process, but regardless, even if that's not true, it's easily proven about the upper staff of various presidential administrations. Because when they retire from the White House, what do? They write a book. So obviously this is a process that many go through. So I would hate to think they're kind of nilly-dilly about it and go, yeah, alien bodies, who cares? That's generally not how security reviews work. I'll stand corrected, though, if somebody shows me DOPSR really just doesn't care. Now, here's Don's response, Don Kluzik. He is essentially what you can gauge from this. Someone who's been around DOPSR a lot. I've found documents ranging from years with Don's name on it. So he's obviously been around the block and somebody that was consulted by the security reviewer. And he says, "Good morning, Michelle. This highlight was not my own. This came in the documents themselves. Vague references to sensitive areas like this are not a problem. If there had been something more substantial, then further review would have been necessary." Okay, well, without seeing it, it's pure speculation. We have no idea what he's referring to. Again, it could be Area 51. He could have given exact latitude, longitude coordinates. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But there you have it. That was the communication and the only concern out of those reviews that were submitted. Here were two other, and these are the last two actually documents from it. I don't know if these are sent to David Grusch as well, or if they're only internal. Obviously, we saw what was sent to David Grusch. I don't know if these are attached with it, but regardless, they're not sensitive forms. What they show is essentially the case number. They go through what the DD form 1910 had kind of outlined, transferred to this form, cleared with recommendations, cleared as amended, not cleared, see memo attached. So that's essentially all the different actions. They check what happened, and that's it. It's signed, and there you go, case closed. So they do quite a lot of these. Again, it's not like they do 5 a year. You can see just by the case numbers alone, which are numbered sequentially. There's quite a few of them. So they do this quite often. So there you have it. Those are the documents themselves. So got a lot more than I thought I would get, but didn't get what I actually wanted, which was what is the content that David Grusch has submitted to the DoD, you know, and in what context. And that's important. And going back to the beginning of the video, it's important because so many people are referencing it for a reason. So we should see what the DoD saw and what they approved and what they reviewed. And to be honest with you, I'll say this before I move on to the questions. and I want to kind of say this a little bit carefully, but it's good that he did the DOPSR review because he had to, right? So respect to him. He did this properly. But if it comes out and it's just written with such vagueness that there's nothing there, I mean, really kind of nothing. Alien bodies, there's craft, reverse engineering, all claims that we have heard for decades and decades in the UFO arena. There's zero value to this. He had to do it. So again, I'm not discrediting anybody for that. He had to, and that's great. But then there's zero value whatsoever. So then it being built up in the debrief article by Ross Coulthard, who's talked about it in the interviews that he has done. I believe that there was there were so many News Nation video segments. I didn't watch them all, but if I remember correctly, it was brought up there. Congresswoman Luna brought it up. David Grusch has brought it up in multiple interviews. So again, you know, if it's not that important, why does everybody keep bringing it up? And in my mind, it's because it is important. So let's see it. And for me, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and start making accusations, but I can't think of any good reason at this point to keep it under wraps. And I think that we, as the general public who are hearing these types of whistleblower claims, and the fact that these documents and submissions exist and that they're important, I believe that in the interest of transparency, we should see them. And I think that there's importance to them. So let me deal with some of the questions. For those who are watching live in the behind the scenes video, I do welcome your questions as well. My software will automatically star the super chats that come in from YouTube. So I'm hopefully going to be able to see those right away. There's almost 900 people now watching through social media, so it's hard to keep up with the actual chat. I'm going to do my best when I see question marks. Help me out. Put the questions in all caps. I know that that's kind of an internet faux pas, but for this purpose, it helps me see them a lot. So I'm not trying to say you have to donate or anything to ask a question. I'm just saying how it looks on my screen. They're brightly colored and they automatically get starred for me to answer. All the other comments from YouTube, X or the formerly Twitter, and Facebook and the Facebook group, they're all going as people are posting. So it gets a little bit nuts. So let's deal with some of the comments, those that were posted on X when I put a call out there. One I want to just go ahead and deal with right up front, which has been a much more common comment that has been thrown at me, sometimes sarcastically, sometimes somebody's genuinely asking. But if he were to reveal those answers, the ones that I said we all have a right to know, he would go to jail. That there's sensitive information there. It's redacted, clearly showing it's sensitive information. So if David Grusch were to come out with this, he would go to jail. He'd be locked up. And you can see it on the screen. These are just a few. Let me read them. He stated it was classified. And why break the law and reveal classified info without permission and go to jail for doing so? You do it. Okay, I will. I have no problems doing it. It's not classified. Here's another one. Maybe he doesn't want to go to jail. Here's another one. I don't know. Maybe the idea of going to prison doesn't appeal to him. Here's another one. If Grusch came out and showed the public what the real version looked like with no redactions, the government would say he released classified info. Grusch would claim he has the right to release it because it was approved, and he would potentially be charged and have to fight a BS case in court. All of that is completely made up and wrong across the board, and these were just a few examples. Let me stress, it is not classified or sensitive information at all. What has been reported since day one is he got full clearance. Here's the clearance stamp that I pulled from the documents. Now that we actually see some type of glimpse into how that process worked, there's even more supporting evidence that it's cleared. All the internal documents, or I assume those two last forms that I showed you that were X'd with the cleared, all that evidence shows that this is fine to show the public. That is the entire point of this. So David Grusch is not going to go to jail. I can't stress that enough. Why I'm spending more time on this than I should is the amount of comments. It's one of the more common things that were thrown at me on how dare I want him to put himself in a position to go to jail. When it comes to the DOPSR review, everything is 100% cleared. He could release it. He could make photocopies it and pass it out at concerts. It doesn't matter. It's cleared. That's the point. But sadly, a lot of people don't get that, and I think it's something that that we need to deal with. So here's some of the questions. Could you go to court to end these redactions? And this is a fantastic question. The answer to that is yes. However, the first step is you have to do a FOIA appeal. The appeal process has to play out. Now, I kind of alluded to this before, but let me go ahead and say it with a little bit more detail. When you have something that's a product, and this is a bad way to put it, but essentially it's a product of David Grusch. It is his writing, answers on paper. It's all his. It's not a government document. So B6 may apply in that instance simply for that reason. That's his property. But there is case law that actually proves that if the information that, albeit may be a product of a private citizen, which he is at this point, if it's in the public domain, it should essentially nullify and void the B6 exemption that was used. Now, without boring you to death with the legal jargon, I dug up two separate FOIA cases, or excuse me, they weren't specific FOIA cases, but cases themselves. Case law will still be powerful to fight this. But essentially, the cases showed that the privacy exemption would not apply if that information was out in the general public. My argument is it is. Throughout worldwide attention, throughout numerous articles, throughout all of that, and him stating that he's limited. He's said what he could, but he's limited by the DOPSR review and what he's approved, which is fine, right? I won't fight that. Well, that means that everything that he has put in there is out there. So I believe with the citations to these case laws that I referenced and an argument that I formulated, I've got a little bit of a chance. But I don't have high hopes. I don't say that every time I file an appeal because I try and be an optimist, not a pessimist. But why I'm saying it here is they may still consider it a product of David Grusch, and it's up to him to release. And to be honest with you, I hate to say it publicly because the case isn't over yet. I would get it. I don't like it. I hope that my citations will work, but I kind of get it. And that's why it's up to David Grusch to be a little bit more transparent with what he had the DoD approve. If he didn't bring it up, I don't think I would have a right to say that. I don't think I could make that demand on something that he doesn't refer to. But on the opposite end of the scale, he does refer to it. And so did the journalists that covered this and broke the story and are tightly close to him and the story as a whole. So obvious, and it's being brought up by a congresswoman in a hearing. So obviously this is something that I think the general public should see. But back to the question. So after that appeal is over and I don't have high hopes, I am not going to pay money out of my pocket to litigate it with the small sliver of chance that I would win, when I know that somebody who's advocating for transparency on this issue could easily show the document, but has chosen not to. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay that money. There's more cases that I would much rather spend money on to litigate in the courts. So, look, it's not, I don't think, a far-fetched request for us to tell David Grusch, hey, why don't you just show it? You've said the answers already. And if he hasn't, and he withheld a portion of those questions from his congressional hearing and from all the news agencies, at least give somebody a reason why. I think that that's more important. James Jurovic, you are saying that Grusch could show the evidence? I'm saying that he can show the DOPSR request. So the actual evidence that he gave to the ICIG and the DoD IG, so those inspector generals, in the respective cases that he submitted, though, that evidence to, no, clearly that you're getting into classified territory, but that is not what we're talking about here. So I'm glad you asked that question, because I think a lot of people conflate the DOPSR review process, which is the documents I just showed you, which are cleared. They are completely cleared for him to show. So I think some are conflating that versus the classified information and stuff that he showed the inspector generals. And that is not what I'm referring to. I respect the classification of that process, but more so the information, if what we're told is to be true, but the classified nature of the information he submitted. So I respect that, but that's not what I'm referring to and not what I feel that he should show. Given the classification of personal information, wouldn't that point to details that are still in the ongoing reprisal investigation? He was cleared to talk about those in general manner, I assume from the interviews he's given, but maybe there's more in there. Well, if it was tied to any investigation whatsoever, the exemption would actually be B7, not B6. B7 is a investigation where there is some type of law enforcement proceeding or something like that. So that one's easy to kind of dismiss simply because of the exemption cited. They would definitely cite B7 if that were the case, but they fell back on B6, the privacy information. So in my opinion, for that reason, there wouldn't be more. So if there is more, there's a different reason for it, but it would not, they would not redact it for that type of reason. Early on, you wish Grusch's authorization to disclose had been examined openly, rather than presumably only by the first two outlets to interview him. Could documentation of approval be made public? And what does it mean that it hasn't been? Well, Tracy, obviously we went through the documents that have been released. I'm not sure if you're referring to what else, but no, according to the DoD, when it comes to these two cases, I have everything, albeit in redacted form in some cases. What does it mean that Grusch hasn't released it? Again, it's fully up to him. I can speculate, but that's not fair to him. There's been a couple people, quite a few actually, online that want me to expand on me saying I think that there's a reason why that this is being withheld. I stand by that. I do think that there's some reason, but that doesn't mean that I know the reason. There's obviously something else holding him back from putting this out there. And let me deal with one other thing that I get a lot. And people throw in my face, well, you're not a lawyer, so who cares what you think? Well, you don't need to be a lawyer to figure a lot of this out, because you can look at actual policy and procedure and see how everything works. But on top of that, let's think about this logically. Albeit I'm not a lawyer, but let's think about this logically. A lot of people say that maybe his attorney is saying, don't release it. Well, logically, what is the point of that? Because in the same breath that the attorney is saying, don't release that because you can veer away from the DOPSR form if you make it public, that was a lot I saw too, that if he made that public, that would somehow reveal that he was veering away from the DOPSR request and get him in trouble, land him in jail. The powers that be have access to what he is approved to talk about. So that was all like a really weird argument, but I saw it again numerous times. So we could dismiss that part. But why would an attorney say, don't show the DOPSR request, but, oh, you want to go hang out with a popular YouTuber and talk off the cuff while you're hiking and sitting on a deck and driving around in a car? Yeah, sure, no problem. What logic is that? Now, I'm not saying that his attorney wasn't there by his side. I tried to find that out. I tagged Jesse Michaels if he could comment, and I never heard back. I'd like to know if his attorney was there and was really watching everything he said, or was he free to do what he wanted? To be honest with you, in a format like that, I would be highly suspect if his attorney was there, meaning he's really going to hang out. I bet you that took hours and hours over the course of days to shoot. So did they fly the attorney to where they were, and or was the attorney local, but stuck around for that many hours out of however many days to shoot that? I don't look, somebody of that caliber of Charles McCullough and his background, I would highly doubt he was there, but hey, I'm totally open to it. I'd love to hear that. But my whole point being is I think that he was kind of free to do this interview, and that's awesome. I'm glad he did, gave a little bit more insight, but bottom line, why would an attorney say, don't release this 100% cleared form, but yeah, let's go do this YouTube interview? That doesn't make sense to me at all. So again, you kind of throw logic in there. You don't need to have a law degree to start breaking this down going, yeah, that doesn't make sense. But a lot of people will argue that to kingdom come, and the jail thing just drives me nuts because that one is so easily disprovable. This one was fun. Tell us how expected/normal it is for authors going through DOPSR review to release it unredacted to the public. How many examples do you have of this being done? Given your data on this, does everyone do this? Or as I'd guess, absolutely nobody, meaning there is no data. Well, why I say this is fun is I know where this person was going. I know they were trying to kind of catch me tripping up a little bit. But what they don't realize is this is easily kind of shown that this is a process that happens all the time with authors submitting something and publishing. Let me show you one example that you likely would all recognize, and that would be skinwalkers at the Pentagon. The entire manuscript was submitted to DOPSR. Now, although I've talked about this in the past, some of you kind of skip these pages in books. But if you look in the beginning of your book, it'll say cleared for public release, May 11, 2021, the DOPSR review case. So to go back to that person's question, yeah, it's easily proven. This is all the time. That is the entire point of the DOPSR review process, is to take that product, whatever it may be, book, manuscript, list of questions, PowerPoint presentations, whatever, and review it for publication. It's generally not, I want to talk about this, this, and this, and then I'm going to run off and I'm going to do my own thing. And then hopefully it's approved. It's generally not how it is. This is exactly how it is. And if you think that that's some kind of like special case, here's another one. Encounter in Rendlesham Forest by Nick Pope. And Nick has posted about this as well, that based on his background, he had to have a DOPSR review as well. They take the manuscript, they submit it, create a case, get approval, they can publish. So these types of things that get thrown around on social media sometimes just make me laugh, because it's like, guys, you can easily fact check this, as this is something that is easily proven. Yet again, people want to try and trip you up. And I mean, with all due respect, some people will just make it up as they go. And yet you don't need the law degree. Just look at some of that stuff that's out there. Alien Frog, thank you so much for that support of the channel, watching live. Could the DOPSR request info contain specific information that he would not want to be out at present due to the active reprisal investigation he alluded to in the hearings? In my opinion, no, because again, you would see a B7, exemption, not B6. But let's just get beyond that for a second. If they said that they, meaning David Grusch and or his attorney, if they stated that there were a part of that that was pertaining to ongoing litigation or his reprisal investigation, if that were true, I 100% guarantee it is not all 10 of those questions. And when you look at all 10 of those questions, or the ones that you can see, there's a few that seem to be redacted. When you look at all of those questions, they would not lead into reprisal. I think that there was one I read to you at least. So absolutely, if, there's a big if and speculation. So beep, 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 speculation only here. But if they, meaning the team of David Grusch, said, hey, you know, we've got this reprisal investigation, although we're cleared to talk about this part, we want to go ahead and withhold this from the public, 100% on board with that. Zero issue, none whatsoever. So just redact that part and release the rest. And that's what I feel like this is kind of getting silly, where you can start creating all this speculation and all of this potential, like maybe it's this or maybe it's that. And that's all fine. And it's great to talk about and fun to talk about. But this is easily remedied by them just addressing it and being a little bit transparent with this process. And they aren't. So we'll find out hopefully why one day, but great question. And hopefully that addressed it for you, because I just don't think that that would be at least the majority of what they, I'm sorry, I'm reading some of these comments as I go, trying to get caught up here, but hopefully address that much of the reprisal investigation that I don't think would apply, or at least it would not apply to the majority of what I'm referring to. Back to the presentation. Here's another question. Why the redactions if he was cleared to talk about it all? Well, so I think we've kind of covered that. It was the B6 exemption. So the FOIA still mandates that agencies apply the redactions that they are mandated to apply, if they apply. Sorry to keep using the same word. But that's essentially their mandate. It is not up to a FOIA person to release something that is cleared if B6 still applies. So hopefully kind of from before and now that explains it. It does get legally kind of confusing sometimes, and it's hard to always explain it in the basic of details. But essentially what applies to the agency releasing this to me through FOIA does not apply to David Grusch. So even though David Grusch is 100% cleared, the agency still has to follow those exemptions that they are mandated to follow, period. And hopefully that's a good summary of what we're talking about here. How easy it would be for him to submit. Okay, so I think they have that typed backwards. How easy would it be for him to submit supplemental DOPSRs to speak on additional details that could obviate the need for a skip? Great question. And it would be just as easy as the first DOPSR submissions that he submitted. So if he wanted to create supplemental DOPSR requests and put those in, he absolutely could. I have the open FOIA case that was filed last week that will cover the time period from the release that you see here to date. And that's essentially in the last few days from recording this. I think I filed it on September 17th off the top of my head. But regardless, it'll cover that window. So if he has gone back for more, hopefully we'll uncover it. But to your question, how easy is it? Absolutely easy. I'm going to read these on the fly, so hopefully I'll be able to help you out here before we get to this next question. I'll back up the slide to the previous one. Take your example with Pope. Isn't it true that Pope talks about the info in the book and does not simply limit himself to quoting from the book? I.e., the content that one speaks about does not necessarily match exactly the published data. I'm going to be honest with you and say I don't exactly know what you're asking here. Take your example with Pope. Isn't it true that Pope talks about the info in the book and does not simply limit him? Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, and that's yeah, that's fair. But most of what Nick Pope talks about is probably not the stuff that had to be approved by DOPSR. And again, I'm stressing most. I'm guessing that the security concerns percentage-wise in that book was probably much less than David Grusch, who's a government whistleblower. Considered a whistleblower. So I think you're talking about two different things here. While I'm using it as an example of the process, you're trying to juxtapose the content. And I don't think you can in this case, because again, you're talking about a whistleblower who is primarily making claims about the government versus a book which only deals with some of the official stuff, but more so investigation after the witness testimony, stuff like that, all covered by First Amendment and quite a bit else. So I think you're juxtaposing two things that content-wise are not related. So hopefully I got your question there enough, but yeah, two kind of different things. So do you not believe Grusch? For me, it's not about like, I believe him or I don't believe him. To me, that's not it. It's not what it's ever been. I get criticized a lot because people think I'm labeling him a liar. And when I ask them, where have I ever called him a liar? They can never cite where I have. Now, spoiler alert, I haven't. But I do question people that make claims that can change humanity. That's what this all comes down to. And I don't think anybody should go, well, I know there's a UFO cover-up, so if somebody comes out and they claim that they have proof of that cover-up, they have to be telling the truth. One thing does not confirm the other thing. That's how I am. Somebody had asked me, it may actually even be in here. Oh, yeah. And in fact, how about that? It's the next question. If you combine the statement that you said that UFOs are by far the hardest to get FOIA data on, what Grusch is reporting, considering his rank, etc., and the myriad of firsthand confessions by others, as well as declassified documents, I am curious why such skepticism. Thanks. Kind of fun how that just kind of went hand in hand with the live chat room. Bottom line is because just because I can absolutely prove a cover-up, just because I can absolutely prove heavy layers of secrecy, that does not automatically confirm somebody who comes out and makes grandiose claims. Those things do not have to go hand in hand. One can be true, the other doesn't have to be. So that for me then, where I kind of say to all of you who think I'm calling him a liar, I haven't. But I think that we need to look at the stuff that we can verify. We're not going to be able to turn around and open a book, search on the internet, file a FOIA or whatever, and uncover the deepest claims that David Grusch is making that obviously, according to him, encroach onto classified territory. But what we can verify, the smaller either claims or statements that he makes, that's what I hone in on. Why? Because then we can actually start to get a primer on how accurate some of those smaller things are. Now, that doesn't automatically mean he's lying. People are mistaken. I'm mistaken all the time. I make mistakes. I think one thing when another is true. Ask my wife. I get myself in trouble all the time. So nobody's perfect. So I don't hold that against anybody. But when somebody comes out in a congressional hearing and frames DOPSR one way, but then in a YouTube interview frames it in a much more, I would say, elaborate way, and then concocting kind of this scenario that he called Catch-22, that I think some people kind of feel like, yeah, that's good. That's totally how it is. So he has to be telling the truth. I don't like stuff like that, because you're taking, again, that under oath proper framing and turning it into something that it's not. So that doesn't mean that he's lying. It's not that I don't believe anything that he says. Again, it's just looking at the information and the evidence that's there, and we should dissect that. And that's when minutia matters, because the stuff that we can verify, we try to. The stuff we can't, we should deal with that. And then that steps us to a lot of this bigger stuff that hopefully will come out over time. So that's kind of the long-winded way of saying I'm not dodging your question. It's not that I do believe or don't believe, but I'm giving him a chance. I think we just have to deal with some of this stuff. Let me also say too, when I was talking to somebody on Reddit, responding to a little bit of criticism over there, may come as a shock. I get criticized on Reddit. They had stated that I always go after people if their stuff doesn't come from FOIA. I'm paraphrasing that, but it was some, grandiose allegation that if it doesn't come from FOIA, I have to attack it. And I'm sorry, that's just not true. There's no proof of that. But where I also want to kind of drive this point is that I push on the people who I feel have the biggest possibility of telling the truth. And that may surprise some people. And let me say that again. I push on the people that I feel have the biggest possibility of telling the truth. People like Corey Good that make all these, silly secret space program claims. And do you see me talk about him at all? Like, this is the first time I've probably ever muttered his name on my channel. I don't go around talking about him. Why not? Because he's full of it. It's all fiction. We all know that. So I don't have to sit there and beat a dead horse. But when I do with people like David Grusch or Luis Elizondo who make bigger claims, I see the potential that they could be right. And that's where I see the value in pushing harder. A lot of people don't like that, but just to give you the insight of who I am, that's why I do it. I believe in these guys more than all those other ones that we don't even have to talk about. So I believe that possibility deserves the pushback. And that's why I do what I do. Because if they are telling the truth, the only thing that I or skeptics like me that are asking important questions, not the debunker, and I hate saying the word because Mick West considers himself a debunker, and I like Mick. I'm talking about the people that are just like malicious with their debunking, that they're clearly not interested in investigating or anything like that. Those are the people I'm referring to here. You can ignore those people. But what I'm trying to say is if people that are making claims deal with people like me that are asking what I feel are important questions that should be addressed, then that only adds to their credibility. And again, it's not just because I'm asking them. Take me out of the equation. I'm talking about people like me that also ask very important questions, that push on the narrative being told. Because if they're telling the truth, there is nothing I can ask. There is nothing they can ask that will hurt that at all. So I just don't understand the vitriol from people that if you challenge the heroes, then you automatically become a villain and you have to be chastised. I don't understand that mindset. If I were to come out with a big claim, I hope you guys push back on me. Truly, I hope you do. Ask questions, push back. If you feel I'm lying, you go at me, because I'm not going to do that to you. So I'm not going to be bothered by it. And I'll respond to those appropriate questions being asked. And I think that that's what those figures in this field that are making these grandiose claims should do, and address some of this stuff. But again, that's just me. Is it possible the reasoning for the redactions could be related to ongoing whistleblower investigation? I think we've covered that. No, I don't believe so. The perception it's giving is you're calling him a liar. I forgot I put this one in here, but we kind of just dealt with it. I laugh because it's just, there's nothing, there's no truth to that. And again, I just kind of went through the diatribe there of push harder on those that I feel could be telling the truth. And I think that that's what we have to do. So let me go through the live chat. Again, if you don't know while I'm going through here what I'm looking at, like if you're watching a replay, I do what are called behind the scenes videos. If you go to the blackvault.com/live, that'll bounce you to the YouTube channel. There's a playlist on there on the behind the scenes video. There's more content than the video segments themselves that I create. And it literally is just that, behind the scenes. But one of the perks, if you watch them, you get to do the live questions and so on, which I can look at and hopefully answer some on the fly for you. But that's where these live questions now are coming from. Shardul Rawat, thank you so much for the support. How was Lou allowed to speak for hours and hours on online podcasts and drop breadcrumbs as he claimed without a DOPSR approval for the same? Is it just considered opinion/speculation? Yes, I'm glad you brought the opinion/speculation back up to me, because I think that, again, that drives the B6 exemption, that this was less about giving factual information. I'm not saying he's lying. Hear me out here. Less about factual information, more about, I think that the government has bodies. I think that they're reverse engineering. And to a security review, sure, that is incredibly vague and likely, I guess, not going to cause much alarm. Again, that's a lot of speculation. But bottom line is opinion. And then that Leslie Kean quote that I read to you guys earlier in the broadcast is exactly that. It was his opinion, and she even used that word. So I think that plays into what we are essentially looking at, but expanding beyond that information. Because let's face it, hours and hours, you're talking about Luis Elizondo, hours and hours with Ross Coulthart, 7 hours from what we're told. There's no way that all of that was reviewed by DOPSR, unless there's a third case that I have yet to discover. But the reality is that the reality is that he expanded with his opinion. That's covered by First Amendment. So as long as he doesn't encroach on classified knowledge that he has, your First Amendment right covers you to tell the truth, as long as you're not violating your security oath, but also covers you to lie. So whichever way that this pans out, he's covered in that respect, and he can expand. But again, a lot of that is just speculation. Let's see what the DoD actually looked at, because I think that that's important, and really goes to what the original journalists saw, because I believe that they saw this paperwork. I think Leslie Kean saw it. She started talking about how bodies was not brought up to her, and she didn't want to talk about the bodies. That's why it wasn't in her article. Well, that's interesting. I mean, if she saw the DOPSR paperwork, it should have been in there, right? So she should have known about that. So those are the types of disconnects that I just don't really understand, of what we are being told versus what we can see versus what we can't see. And you kind of add all that up, and there's a lot of questions here. So, how can they do it? Well, again, First Amendment covers a lot, and they're just speculating. The breadcrumbs, just very quickly to add this in, those always bothered me, because again, without a DOPSR review that you can talk about, let's say, what was it? The triangle coming out of the water, the 20+ minute video, the mere existence of those are likely a classified product. How do we know that? Well, if it's all true, if it wasn't classified, Luis Elizondo could just tell us, right? I mean, we can all agree on that. If it's not classified, so likely it's encroaching on classified material if it's all true. So there's a triangle coming out of the water. There's this 20+ minute video, is 17 minute, whatever the heck the number was, this video that exists. Look, you can't talk about that stuff, even hint at it, put it out in breadcrumbs if it truly is classified. How do I know that? Don't believe me. Don't take my word for it. Look at what David Grusch says, that he had to go get DOPSR approval to talk about some of this stuff, even in vagueness, lacking specificity. Look, I have my own problems with that. But again, let's take me out of the equation. Just deal with David Grusch, because my biggest critics will definitely choose him over me. So listen to him. So all those breadcrumbs that came out of hours and hours and hours of podcasts, even on my own channel here, if you listen, I think that he was hinting at things. That's problematic, very problematic, if you ask me. So I've always had an issue with it. And I think that many of us should have that issue. So lots to uncover here. It really is. And to your question, obviously we veered away from David Grusch, but the situation is the same. You have to be incredibly careful when you're in those positions. And I fully admit that. So all the more reason to show that DOPSR request and show what you got approved. Let me go through some of some of these comments. Let me see if there's, and again, just put them in all caps for me. Do you need a DOPSR to speak with Congress in a SCIF, or is it just for the general public? You get into a kind of a dicey area. That's a great question on whether or not you need to do that. If the congressmen or congresswomen have proper clearances, then I believe that you can speak freely. What has not really been explained to me anyway, me being the general public, I mean, I read the trades. I don't have any secret contacts and know anything that you don't. But what really hasn't been explained is why couldn't they get a SCIF? Was it because David Grusch doesn't have the clearance? That's what I was like, the only thing that I read, that he lacked the appropriate clearance, but that doesn't really kind of make sense. So when they say they denied the SCIF, who exactly are they talking about? Because if they name that, there's a paper trail to that. So I think that there's a lot of puzzle pieces that are missing. And although I like Tim Burchett, I'd love to talk with that guy. There are some things that he said that I think has added a little bit more confusion, that being one of them, that he kind of, in the interview that I saw of him, I think it was a News Nation interview, just kind of hummed and hawed and said he didn't have the appropriate clearance. And then he, claims a cover up, which is fine, but let's get a little bit more detail. Like exactly who said that? Was it the DOD/Pentagon? Was there someone or some arm of Congress that says, hey, no, he doesn't have proper clearances? And if you know, and I haven't seen the interview because it's so hard to keep up with this, please let me know. But the only thing that I've heard of was that, and it just kind of doesn't make sense. It kind of adds a little bit more confusion. So no, he doesn't need a DOPSR review for that. If he's obviously talking to somebody that lacks a clearance, then yes, he needs to make sure he's able to talk about it. And then you have the added whistleblower language and protections. So he has a little bit more freedom under the advice of counsel, obviously, to then speak a little bit more openly with lawmakers, given the appropriate clearances and access. So there's a lot of different ways that he can talk to somebody, and no, you don't have to go through a DOPSR review. So, John, what's their actual agenda for such misleading acts? Please share and speculate your own personal opinion with an eye roll. Probably because you know my answer. I'm not going to speculate that. When you say there, you can be referring to two different things, David Grusch or the general government as a whole. I assume you mean the general government as a whole. And that's where I'll speculate a little bit more. There's something about these phenomena that they're trying to hide. That's full stop. Like, I don't know how to really phrase it any more simplistically. They're hiding it. They don't want us to know. I've got ample evidence to show that cover up. It's definitely real. So is the phenomena. It doesn't mean it's alien. I'm just saying there's something about that lead to these misleading acts that they do, saying documents don't exist when they do, citing FOIA exemptions that I've fought, and in some cases have won and lifted redactions or got documents released. So there's obviously something there. You may throw your monitor at me if I say that maybe you meant David Grusch and his misleading acts. I wouldn't label them misleading acts from David Grusch, but obviously there is a lack of transparency for some of this stuff that I think should be addressed, namely all of the DOPSR material and the answers and so on. So I think that there's a lot there that should be explored, and hopefully it will be. But both sides, let me say this generally speaking, and then I'll move on. Both sides are obviously hiding something. One side, the government, obviously hiding a lot more. Okay. But I'm sorry. So is the David Grusch side. So is the Luis Elizondo side. So is the Christopher Mellon side. They're not telling you everything they know. Sometimes they hint at it. Sometimes they say, I've heard from people. Other times they drop their breadcrumbs. look, fill in the blank, but obviously all sides are not being honest. And if the lynch mob comes after me for that, so be it. But that's easily backed up by their own words. I think you can easily look and see how they are not being fully transparent with the general public. U.S. government top of the list, but so are the former U.S. government people. They aren't as well. Thank you all for listening and watching. Again, thumbs up here on YouTube is a huge help. No matter where you're listening or watching, though, there's a thumbs up, a way to star the video. Obviously, I aim for the 5 stars. I aim for the thumbs up. If you feel it's deserving, please do so. Subscribe in whatever way that you are watching. YouTube is the most popular. That's where all of the chat really goes on. That's where 95% of the people watch. Go to theblackvault.com/live. That will bounce you to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed. Turn the notifications on. That really helps you get notified when I am live. That way you can hang out in the chat, see the different questions, correspond with others. It really is a lot of fun. Just keep it friendly, keep it respectful, and it's much appreciated. That being said, thanks again. This is John Greenwald Jr. signing off, and we'll see you next time.